While you are sitting at your desk checking the spot price of silver, while you're debating whether to buy the dip or wait for a pullback, and while the bullion banks in London are shuffling paper contracts back and forth, playing their endless game of musical chairs, a new buyer has quietly entered the room. This buyer is not a stacker. They are not an investor. They are not a collector. This buyer does not care about the premiums. They do not care about the technical charts. They do not care about the 200-day moving average or the RSI. And most terrifying of all, this buyer is not buying silver to hold it. They are not buying it to store wealth for the future. They are not even buying it to build a smartphone or a solar panel or an electric vehicle that you can touch and feel. They are buying silver to burn it. We are watching a phenomenon that the financial media is completely ignoring. The talking heads on CNBC are too busy arguing about interest rates. The crypto channels are too busy watching Bitcoin. They are missing the physical reality on the ground, and more importantly, the reality in the sky. We are entering the era of the weather weapon. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not science fiction. This is a massive industrial vertical that is emerging from the shadows of experimental science and becoming a cornerstone of global government policy. And the fuel for this weapon is silver, specifically silver iodide. We have spent the last 3 months tracking procurement contracts. We have dug through the federal ledgers of the United States Department of the Interior. We have translated the tender offers from the China Meteorological Administration. We have looked at the budget expansions for the UAE's National Center of Meteorology. The data is undeniable. It shows a massive, coordinated global surge in the acquisition of silver-based pyrotechnics. The world is running out of water. The aquifers are draining. The dams are reaching dead pool status. And governments have realized they have only one option left. They cannot wait for rain. They cannot pray for rain. They have to force it. And to force the rain, they have to shoot silver into the atmosphere. They are literally spraying the strategic stockpile into the clouds. In this deep dive intelligence briefing, we are going to expose the true scale of this consumption. We are going to look at the massive Sky River projects in Asia that aim to terraform the sky. We will break down the specific chemical composition of the flares being burned over Texas, Nevada, and Colorado right now. And we will prove, mathematically, that this silver is never coming back. The vault is leaking, and the leak is pointing upwards. To understand why the silver drain is accelerating so rapidly right now, you first have to understand the desperation of the buyer. This is not a luxury trade. This is a survival trade. Let's look at the situation on the ground in late 2025. The mega drought in the American West has entered its 24th year. This is the driest period in the region for 1,200 years. The Colorado River system, which supplies water to 40 million people and a multi-billion-dollar agricultural industry, is teetering on the brink of collapse. Farmers in Arizona are leaving fields fallow. Cities in Nevada are ripping up grass lawns. The hydroelectric turbines at Glen Canyon Dam are at risk of shutting down because the water level is too low to spin them. Move to China. The Yangtze River Basin, the manufacturing heart of the world, has faced record-breaking heat waves and droughts for 3 consecutive years. Factories, including those making parts for Apple and Tesla, have had to shut down because there wasn't enough hydropower. The northern plains, the breadbasket of China, are facing desertification. Move to the Middle East. Ambitious projects like Neom in Saudi Arabia and the endless expansion of Dubai are demanding water resources that simply do not exist in the ground. They are building cities in the desert, and they need water to sustain them. Governments have done the math, and the math is terrifying. The cost of a drought is measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Crop failures, empty reservoirs, stalled factories, thirsty cities, mass migration, civil unrest. The economic damage of a dry year is catastrophic. It creates inflation. It topples governments. Now, compare that cost to the price of silver. Even at $35, $50, or $100 an ounce, silver is incredibly cheap compared to the value of water. If you are a government official and you can spend $10 million on silver flares to generate $100 million worth of water for your farmers, you make that trade every single time. You don't hesitate. You don't haggle. This creates what economists call absolute price inelasticity. We talk about this with industrial users like Samsung. If silver goes up, they might try to use less. But this is different. This is survival. If you are the water manager for Las Vegas or the Minister of Agriculture for China, do you care if the price of silver doubles? No, you need the rain. You will pay any price to secure the silver iodide flares because the alternative is catastrophe. This means the cloud seeding industry has the power to outbid the investor. They will outbid the jewelry maker. They will outbid the solar panel factory. Water is life. Silver is just the mechanism to get it. We are seeing a profound shift in how silver is viewed by the state. For 5,000 years, silver was money. Then, for 100 years, silver was an industrial component for electronics. Now, in 2025, silver has become a hydrological key. It is the key that unlocks the clouds. And when you are thirsty, you don't save the key, you use it. For decades, cloud seeding was seen as a fringe experiment. It was something done by local ski resorts to get a little more snow, or by desperate farmers in North Dakota chasing a storm. It was small scale, it was local, it barely registered on the global silver demand charts. That era is over. The mom and pop eras of weather modification is dead. Today, weather modification is a sophisticated military-grade operation. It is being integrated into national infrastructure planning. Let's look at the three major players driving this consumption right now. First, the China Sky River project. The Chinese government has launched the largest weather modification program in human history, known as the Sky River Initiative. They are not just seeding a few farms. They are attempting to terraform the sky. As of late 2025, reports indicate they have deployed a network of tens of thousands of fuel-burning chambers on the Tibetan Plateau. These are ground-based furnaces that burn silver iodide sticks continuously, using the natural updrafts of the mountains to lift the silver particles into the clouds. They have a fleet of high-altitude Winglong drones, military UAVs adapted for weather modification, capable of carrying massive payloads of silver flares into the stratosphere. Their goal? To cover an area of 5.5 million square kilometers. That is 1.5 times the size of India. They are attempting to divert atmospheric moisture from the wet south to the dry north. In a recent test over the Xinjiang region, a fleet of drones released silver iodide to generate enough rainfall to fill huge reservoirs. This is not seeding. This is atmospheric engineering, and it runs on silver. Second, the United Arab Emirates. In the UAE, the National Center of Meteorology isn't playing games. They have aggressively expanded their rain enhancement program. They are running nearly 300 cloud seeding missions every single year. That is almost one mission every single day. They operate a dedicated airfield with custom-designed aircraft, equipped with racks of 48 flares each. They fire hygroscopic flares for warm clouds and glaciogenic flares laced with silver iodide for cold clouds. Just this year, in January 2025, they announced the sixth cycle of their grant program, increasing the budget to $1.5 million per project to develop more effective ways to deliver silver into the clouds. They are using nanotechnology to coat the silver particles, making them more reactive. They aren't slowing down, they are doubling down. Third, the American West. Here in the United States, the scale is smaller than China, but it is growing faster than anywhere else. This is a global, synchronized bid for silver. The market for silver iodide is forecasted to reach nearly $500 million by 2030. Every dollar of that market represents physical silver bars being taken from the refinery, turned into chemical dust, and scattered into the wind. Let's get technical. We need to quantify this drain. The skeptics, the banking analysts who tell you not to worry, will say, it's just a few grams per cloud. It's negligible compared to the 800 million ounces mined every year. Is it? Let's look at the forensics of a standard glaciogenic flare. We analyzed the spec sheets from Ice Crystal Engineering, one of the leading manufacturers of these flares in the US. A standard ejectable flare contains roughly 40 grams of pyrotechnic mixture. Inside that mixture, approximately 5.5 grams is pure silver iodide. 5.5 grams. That doesn't sound like much. It's about the weight of a quarter. If you just fired one, it wouldn't matter. But you don't fire one flare. Cloud seeding is a volume game. It is a saturation strategy. A single cloud seeding mission will fire dozens, sometimes hundreds of flares into a storm front to ensure coverage. You have to see the entire length of the cloud formation. A single aircraft can carry racks of 100 flares on its wings and belly. Let's do the math on a single heavy mission. 100 flares times 5.5 grams equals 550 grams of silver iodide. That is half a kilogram of silver consumption in a single flight. That is roughly 17 troy ounces of silver. Now, multiply that by the UAE's 300 missions per year. 17 ounces times 300 equals 5 to 100 ounces. That's just one small country flying a few planes. Now, look at China. China isn't flying one plane. They're operating thousands of ground-based furnaces. These furnaces burn silver iodide sticks continuously for 4 to 6 hours during a storm event. They are creating a wall of silver particles rising up the mountainside. When you aggregate thousands of furnaces burning continuously, plus thousands of drone flights, plus the artillery shells, you are consuming tons of silver annually. And here is the critical distinction that you must understand as an investor. This is the point that changes everything. This is not like the silver in a Tesla. When you put 1 ounce of silver into a Tesla, that silver is still there. It is sitting in the driveway. In 15 years, when the car is scrapped, that silver could theoretically be recovered and recycled. It is above ground stock. It is still in the inventory of humanity. Cloud seeding is different. Cloud seeding is a consumption event. When that flare ignites, the silver is vaporized. It turns into an aerosol. It spreads out over thousands of square miles. It mixes with the rain. It falls into the dirt. It washes into the mud. It is dispersed at the parts per trillion level. You cannot recycle rain. You cannot mine the mud at the bottom of a reservoir to get the silver back. Once that flare triggers, that silver is deleted from the ledger of human assets. It is returned to the earth, sure, but it is gone from the market. Forever. This is the ultimate burn rate. We are taking the most conductive, most reflective, most essential metal of the 21st century, and we are turning it into smoke to keep the golf courses green in Dubai and the reservoirs full in Beijing. But for the intelligent investor, the what is not enough. You need to understand the why. The most common question from the skeptics, the bears who think silver is just a barbarous relic, is simply this. Why silver? Why can't they use something cheap? Why can't they use sand? Why can't they use dust? Why can't they use table salt? It is a fair question. If you're going to burn tons of material, you want it to be cheap. But the answer is not economic. It is crystallographic. To understand the weather weapon, you have to understand the microscopic architecture of ice. Here is the physics problem that every cloud seeder faces: supercooling. In a high-altitude cloud, water does not freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. Pure water vapor can actually stay liquid all the way down to 40 degrees Celsius because the water molecules are perfectly clean. They have nothing to grab onto. They need a scaffold. They need a blueprint. In physics, we call this a nucleator. Nature usually uses dust or pollen or bacteria to start this process, but nature is inefficient. Nature waits for the temperature to drop to 20 degrees before the snow starts. Governments cannot wait. They need a material that forces the freeze instantly and at much warmer temperatures, around 5 degrees. This is the lock and key. Silver iodide has a crystal lattice structure that is a near-perfect geometric mimic of natural ice. The atomic spacing of the silver and iodine atoms matches the spacing of oxygen atoms in an ice crystal to within 1.5%. This is not a coincidence. This is a geological miracle. When you spray silver iodide into a supercooled cloud, the water droplets are fooled. They think the silver particle is a piece of ice. They latch onto it instantly. They snap into the hexagonal grid. In milliseconds, the liquid vapor turns into a heavy ice crystal. Gravity takes over. The crystal falls, melts on the way down, and hits the Dubai desert or the Colorado mountains as rain. This is why silver iodide dominates the market. It is the only material on the periodic table that offers this level of epitaxial fit. We have seen the lab reports from the Desert Research Institute. They spent decades trying to find a substitute. They tested lead iodide. It works, but it's toxic. You can't spray lead on your crops. They tested copper sulfide. It's cheap, but it's unstable and doesn't work in cold clouds. They tested kaolinite. It requires temperatures far too cold to be useful. Silver is the Goldilocks material. It is non-toxic enough to pass regulations and efficient enough to work at 5 degrees. And in the laws of physics, there is no negotiation. If you want the rain, you pay the silver toll. The bears will argue, but wait, I read that they use salt flares in the UAE. I read that they use liquid propane. Yes, they do. But this is where the nuance matters. You have to understand the difference between warm seeding and cold seeding. Warm seeding happens in tropical environments, where the cloud is warm. You use salt to make the water droplets fat and heavy so they fall. But salt cannot create ice. Salt cannot generate snowpack. And snowpack is what matters. For drought relief, for the massive snowpack augmentation in the Rockies, the Sierra Nevada, the Tibetan Plateau, and the winter storms of China, you are dealing with cold clouds. You need to generate ice. You cannot use salt in a cold cloud. It literally does the opposite. It melts ice. You must use a glaciogenic agent. And in the world of glaciogenic agents, silver iodide is the apex predator. Let's look at the alternatives they tried to use to replace silver and why they failed. Liquid propane works by thermodynamic cooling, but you have to carry massive, heavy, pressurized tanks on the aircraft. It is dangerous. You can't put a propane tank on a small drone. It's a logistical nightmare. Dry ice works great, but it evaporates before it even hits the target zone. You have to fly inside the cloud, which is dangerous turbulence. You can't fire it from the ground. Nanoparticles of engineered silica clog the burners and cost 10 times more than silver. Silver iodide flares are compact. They are stable. You can store them in a warehouse in Texas for 20 years, and they will still work. You can fire them from the wing of a drone, from a plane, or from a ground-based furnace. This is why the procurement contracts we tracked are all specifying AGI pyrotechnics. The industry isn't moving away from silver. They are moving deeper into it. The new nanotechnology, flares being developed by the UAE, are not removing the silver. They are coating the silver with titanium dioxide to make it more active. They are maximizing the efficiency of the silver, not replacing it. Now we come to the most critical concept for the silver investor. This is the economic kill shot. Recoverability. This is the difference between consumption and usage. When you buy a silver coin, it has 0 entropy. It is concentrated. It is in your hand. When Apple puts silver in an iPhone, it has low entropy. It is inside the phone. Even when the phone is thrown away, the silver is still clumped together on the circuit board. You can shred the phone, melt the copper, and extract the silver. It costs money, but the silver is physically there. It is above ground. Cloud seeding is a maximum entropy event. It is the ultimate scattering machine. When that flare burns at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the silver is vaporized into an aerosol. The particle size is roughly 0.05 microns. That is smaller than a bacterium. That is smaller than a virus. These particles float into the cloud. They become the core of a raindrop. They fall over a 500 square mile watershed. Some land in the reservoir and sink to the bottom. Some land on the leaves of a pine tree and stay there. Some land in the mud. Some wash out into the ocean and are lost in the salt water. Can you get it back? No. The silver is now distributed at the parts per trillion level. To recover 1 ounce of silver from a seeded watershed, you would have to process millions of tons of topsoil and filter billions of gallons of water. The energy cost would be higher than the GDP of a small country. This is irrecoverable consumption. Every single ounce that goes into a cloud seeding flare is an ounce that is effectively deleted from the human economy. It is returned to the crust of the earth, yes, but it is removed from the market supply. This creates a constant non-recyclable deficit. The recycling rate for silver bars is 100%. The recycling rate for electronics is roughly 15-20%. The recycling rate for cloud seeding is 0%. As the program scales from 400 million to 1 billion, that 0% recycling rate becomes a black hole in the supply-demand balance sheet. It is a one-way valve. The silver leaves the vault, and it never, ever comes back. And here is the ultimate irony. The one thing that usually stops industrial consumption, environmental regulation, is actually protecting this industry. You might ask, isn't spraying silver toxic? Won't the EPA stop it? Won't the Sierra Club sue them? We did the research. We read the environmental impact statements from the major projects, the PG&E project in Lake Almanor, California, and the Snowy Hydro project in Australia. The conclusion is always the same, no significant impact. Why? Because silver iodide is insoluble. Unlike free silver ions, which are toxic to fish, silver iodide does not dissolve in water. It acts like sand. It acts like an inert rock. When it falls into a lake, it sinks to the bottom and becomes sediment. Because it doesn't dissolve, it isn't bioavailable. It doesn't get absorbed by fish or plants or humans in toxic quantities. The concentration is so low, parts per trillion, that it is indistinguishable from the natural background silver in the soil. Because it is safe, there is no regulatory break. There is no EPA ban coming. There is no silver tax to stop it. There are no protests blocking the runways. The green light is on. Governments have the environmental sign-off to spray as much silver as they need to keep the taps running. In fact, environmental groups often support cloud seeding because it restores habitats and fills wetlands. The safety of silver iodide is actually the risk for the silver supply. It creates a perfect crime scenario where the strategic stockpile can be drained in broad daylight with the blessing of the environmental agencies. If it were toxic, they would have to stop. Because it is safe, they can accelerate, and they are accelerating. Now, we have to talk about the market impact. This is where the rubber meets the road for your portfolio. Most investors make a critical oversight. They analyze silver like it's a consumer good. They think, if silver goes to $50 an ounce, demand will drop. People will buy fewer silver bracelets. Tech companies will try to engineer it out of their devices. The market will balance itself. That is how a free market works. That is called price elasticity. When the price goes up, the demand goes down. But industrial weather modification introduces a new game-changing variable, the sovereign buyer. A sovereign buyer is different. When national meteorology centers buy aircraft and flares, they are not trading a profit and loss statement. They are securing national infrastructure. When major economies expand their atmospheric water programs to ensure food security for billions of people, they are not checking the spot price to see if it's a good entry point. This demand is price inelastic. If silver goes to $35, they buy. If silver goes to $50, they buy. If silver goes to $100, they buy. Why? Because the cost of not buying, the cost of food insecurity, water scarcity, and social instability is infinitely higher. Governments can allocate unlimited sovereign capital to acquire hard assets. They will secure the market supply, regardless of the premium. This is the most significant demand factor imaginable for a commodity. You have a buyer with national treasury backing bidding against the private sector for a finite resource that is essential for stability. Who do you think wins that auction? The electronics manufacturer or the State Department? To understand why governments will secure supply at any price, you have to understand the return on investment of cloud seeding. We call this the leverage of the atom. Let's look at the numbers from a recent 2025 study in the Western United States. Now, compare that to the alternatives. Do the math. Cloud seeding is 100 times cheaper than desalination. It is 50 times cheaper than buying water on the spot market. This is an economic no-brainer. Even if the price of silver goes to $500 an ounce, the cost of the flare only goes up a few dollars. The cost per acre-foot of water might go from $10 to $15. It is still the most efficient way to get water on planet Earth. As long as that leverage exists, the demand will never stop. In fact, as the climate shifts and water gets scarcer, the value of that water goes up. The ROI of the silver goes up. The incentive to utilize the silver increases every single year. This creates a positive feedback loop. Scarcity causes more seeding. Seeding consumes silver. Silver shortages raise prices. But the scarcity makes the water more valuable, so they acquire more silver anyway. We are heading for a resource collision that very few analysts are modeling. Governments have two existential mandates right now. First, decarbonize. They must build massive solar arrays to meet energy targets. This consumes silver paste. Second, adapt. They must secure water resources to manage the climate. This consumes silver iodide. Both of these mandates, energy and water, are silver dependent, and both are expanding simultaneously. The solar market is growing at 20% a year. The atmospheric market is growing at 8 to 10% a year. These two curves are intersecting. This is the supply crunch scenario for the industrial user. Tech giants need silver for batteries and chips. EV makers need silver for contacts. But now they have to compete with national interior departments. They have to compete with global meteorological administrations. Who secures that supply? The entity with the national security mandate historically takes precedence. We could see a future, very soon, where silver is designated a critical strategic material, not just for energy security, but for hydrological security. This could lead to export controls. Producing nations could limit silver exports to support domestic programs. It leads to national stockpiling. Governments quietly securing inventory to ensure they have resources for the next dry cycle. It leads to a supply shift. Mints may have to compete with chemical companies making industrial flares. The old saying in the metals community is, gold is hoarded, silver is consumed. We usually mean consumed like it goes into a device. But cloud seeding is the ultimate form of consumption. It is the total dispersion of the asset. We are watching the financialization of the atmosphere. And the currency of that trade is silver. As the cycles get more erratic, the planes will fly more often. The flares will burn brighter. The dispersion will accelerate. The strategic stockpile isn't sitting in a vault. It isn't sitting in a warehouse. It is being loaded onto aircraft. It is being utilized over the mountains. It is floating in the atmosphere, invisible, irretrievable, and gone from the ledger. They are dispersing strategic assets. And it is never coming back down, except as rain. The question for you is not, will the price go up? The question is, will there be any metal left to acquire? When the sovereign buyer enters the market with a stability mandate, the price chart changes vertically. This is the atmospheric strategy. And the target is the supply. Hold the line, get physical.